We invited all of the 6 or 7 people who were interested in doing this to come to Toronto, and we gave them all exactly the same tour of the building, the same materials of the vision, the same idea of budget and purpose and such. Daniel came with his wife Nina as one of those tours, and I remember coming up to the museum that sort of November morning or whatever it was. Maybe it was a cold morning, and we did the tour. He was probably the most reserved of all of those architects who came forward. We wandered around the building. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't make many observations, but he was obviously looking, and I tried to engage him in conversation, but he was holding his cards to his chest. I knew that he had done the Jewish Museum in Berlin. I knew that he was doing other buildings that were unique and almost dangerously, radically unique. But I had no idea what to expect from him after he left. The others were much more ebullient and were engaged. He became that way later when he got more engaged. So when we got the 6 initial proposals here, his was the last to come in, and it was the most radical. It was the most radically presented, in a sense. 11 napkins, drawing on our own napkins from our own restaurant. And when he got to the finals of the last 3, where they all got some resources to build models and details, that is when he became the most engaged of them all. In those last months, he was the one who would set up telephone calls to me on a Sunday morning and say, do you have an hour or an hour and a half? Because we're all sitting here in Berlin and we have 21 questions this week. And the first question in the first call, these weekly calls that went on for about a month, was, tell me exactly what the school students do after they come in the school entrance. Where do they go? What's the first thing they have to do? That's where they started. And they did a whole walkthrough of how the museum is used by students, by volunteers, by the busiest times of the year, and so forth. That just kept building questions. And it was only when we finally went to Berlin and as the committee to see their proposal and their models that we saw the result, which was a very, very thoughtful response, not only to the written program, but to all these very detailed questions of function and use. And by then you could see the genius in the man, I think, and ultimately he prevailed. Well, yes, after we chose Libeskind, we already had our construction manager, Van Boss, together here. Libeskind had to partner with the local architect, B&H Architects of Toronto, which is a big firm. They called a meeting at their offices here on University Avenue. We had the engineers, a Roop from London, we had the construction managers, we had the 2 architects, and we were chairing this meeting, going around the meeting, and the chair of the meeting from B&H said to you, we're going to ask everybody here who's just meeting each other for the first time, what's the one big question you have that you want to bring to the table just at the outset before we launch this great project? Let's start with the client. Mr. Thorsell, what's your big question? And I thought, I don't know whether I have a big question. You can give me 30 seconds. So I looked around the table and I came back to them and I said, here's my question. We've engaged all of you people because you know what you're doing. You have track record, you have great expertise, you have great insight. As a client, we're not in the business of spending $200 million every so often on a building and on facilities. So I want to know from you what makes a good client, because we want to be a good client. And there was kind of a big pause in the room. And so they said, well, Mr. Libeskind, let's start with you. What makes a good client? And he was right on the bite. I thought he was going to say someone who pays the bills or something of this nature. But his answer was really very smart because he had been working with clients. And he said, fundamentally 2 things. The client essentially knows what they want to do, what they're looking for, what they want. They're not confused about what they want. They'll be responsive to input, but they know what they're after in some way, clear way. And the second thing is that the client speaks with one voice, not the board chair and then the CEO and then the major donor. You're not always going around getting contrary and conflicting information. One voice. So he said, my sense with the Royal Ontario Museum is that the museum's statement here of its vision and its detailed program, very clear what they want to do. That's good. And so far, they're speaking with one voice. So he said to me, I hope you can keep that up over there. And I think we were essentially able to do that.